Hello everyone, Floppy Waffle 69 here, and for today's viewing entertainment, we are looking at our next ship in our series of Down the Line, going to the Preussen. We are looking at the Tier 9 German battleship, the Friedrich de Grosse. This ship has a bit of a reputation in game. One that is very heavily negative, I would have to say. I would say this ship alone has to be up there in the top 5 most free XP pass ships in the game. I think this ship, overwhelmingly, there's a massive consensus that this is a terrible battleship. And I believe this ship is just overall not really feared. As a cruiser player, I do lick my chops when I see this, not because of the ship, but mainly because the players playing the ship. So yeah, the reputation is not very good. And why is that? Well, I'll start with the negatives before I get into all the soft stats and all that kind of stuff. But one, you're massive. You're essentially a Bismarck that took steroids and got twice the size. Your guns cannot hit hardly anything. And you have a massive amounts of superstructure, which again is something that is very common down this line. And you've seen that now for quite some time, at least since the Tier 6. So why is this ship so bad? Why is there this misconception, in my opinion, of why this ship is just so fucking terrible in this game? And I think the big reason for why this ship is bad is, one, it is big and does handle like a truck. But two, the overall play style that people are still trying to push on this ship is simply doesn't work. And that is the whole, you're a tank, you're brawling, get in there and brawl, utilize your secondaries, you have a turtleback, you can't be citadel, blah, blah, and so and so. And it gets you killed within the first 5-7 minutes of the game. Now, do I think the ship is good? Well, good might be a bit of a stretch. I definitely don't think this ship is bad, but I do think she is a solid battleship. And that is a bit of a statement, and I'm going to try to present some of my findings and data on her to kind of suggest and prove that that's kind of what I believe, and what I believe she is to be just a solid battleship. I do think that this ship could use some love. And mainly that's going to come down to saturation and splitting the part of her HP pools per each section, especially in regards of her superstructure. I could think very much would help this ship because the ship just eats damage, eats damage. But when you look at the armor scheme, she's actually really not that poorly armored. She's very heavily armored. So, and I mean, we might as well just go right into it looking at the soft stats here. I mean, once we look at the armor scheme, you'll see what I'm talking about. We have this 32mm nose with a 60mm icebreaker. We go around to the ass. We have a 32mm ass with this aft end plating of 90mm. And then we have the section of aft end deck of 50 and the, again, fore end deck of 50, getting into the main casemate armor belt deck, which is 80mm, and the main deck being 50. Not bad at all. That'll shatter a lot of HE and keep, it basically shatter a lot of HE. It won't absorb that much damage. Basically, the only problem with this value is that AP bombs are going to love that. And for some reason, your deck is coated in gasoline because this thing ignites so incredibly quickly. And fire has got to be the #1 issue that this ship does suffer from. So, looking at the upper armor belt, 145mm, going down to the armor belt of 300 meters. Again, this does have the turtleback, but again, this is a problem you're going to see with the Friedrich de Grosse and the Pommern. I believe I touched on this with the Pommern video way back, 3-4 months ago. As you can see, the slope of the turtleback is actually not as sloped as others. If you don't know the exact value of what the slopes are at, just know that you can tell that they're not as sloped, and this does mean this means in theory that you will actually eat citadels a little bit more frequently than others, and that is proven. Friedrich and the Pommern do eat more citadels, more so than the other battleships like the Grosse, Preussen, and Biz and Tirpitz. Again, we've talked about the weakness that is right here around this. I guess if you want to call it a cheek or whatever, I don't really know what you want to call it, but we'll just call it a cheek for simplicity issues. Is right here. You could basically shoot an AP shell with high enough penetration that'll bypass the turtleback and go right into the ship or the citadel, which is only 220mm of effective armor there for you guys. And you can see that the citadel actually is above water, not below or waterline as well. So the only thing really protecting it is that turtleback. going into her survivability, when we look at her survivability, it is clocking in at 84,300 with a 25% torpedo protection, which again, the torpedo protection shouldn't be anything too crazy. Given the fact that the Musashi has a 55%, Daisen has a 53, yada yada yada. So you're definitely middle to bottom. So you're going to be relying heavily on your hydroacoustic search consumable you actually do have on this ship, coming from the Bismarck down to the Tier 9, and you will also see that on the Tier 10 as well. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the guns or the main armament of the Friedrich Grosse, and this is a little bit of a choice you do have here. On one hand, you have the standard 406 millimeter guns, which I don't have currently equipped. Or you can have the upgraded version. I'll just go to the screen. Or you can have the upgraded version of the 420s. Now, this is a big debate about which is better. And the big noticeable difference between the two that you're going to be able to see is that reload time and that overall damage of your of the shells, right? That's for HE and AP. Other than that, the shell characteristics are pretty much the same, other than the penetration mechanics I find on the AP shell for the Friedrich der Grosse. The Freddy's 406 millimeter guns at a standard battleship range of, let's say, 16 kilometers, have less penetration with the 406s than they do the 420s. In my opinion, after playing countless games in the ship, acquiring an E rank in this vessel, and getting fairly good numbers in this ship as well, I might add, I find that the superior choice of armament types is actually the 420s. Though I do meme around sometimes with the 406s, because a lot of people don't realize with a reload build on the 406s, you can get basically a 23-second reload time, which is freaking incredible. But to me, again, extending that to 26 seconds or 25.5 seconds for 420s just for a little bit more alpha and a little bit longer reload, I'm fine with that. The shells just feel like they hit harder, they penetrate more, especially from steeper angles. Just all in all, the shell acts better for me, so I would highly recommend doing the 420s. But that being said, try both, and then you be the judge of what you think works for you. In my opinion, the 420s is the superior choice. So, and then again, with the, actually, I don't really talk too much about the main battery because we'll talk more about those when we're actually in game. Just know that the high explosives for the 105s pen 105 millimeters of effective armor, and then the 406s do 102s, and that's with the quarter penetration mechanic. So it's worth talking about that matter. Going into the secondary armament of this ship, which is the 6x2 150s and the 8x2 105s. The 150s reloading in 7.5 and having a maximum range of 8.3. And then the 105s matching that 8.3 with a reload time of 3.1. The 105s can pen 25 millimeters of armor, while the 150s can pen 38 millimeters of armor. And that 38 millimeter threshold is important because that's a lot of battles. You see the French, the Americans, the British, pretty standard, and that's a really good threshold to cross. The big thresholds in the game that you want to make sure that you can cross are the 16 millimeter plating for overmatch purposes of like 305 millimeter guns or higher. I guess, well, 234s technically. 25 millimeters, which is the 380 millimeter guns. The 27 millimeter plating, which is the 406s and higher, and then your 32, which is going to be the 460s and higher. These are all important armor thresholds to kind of memorize. When it comes to like overmatch. And again, if you guys don't understand about the formulas that are in game, I can go ahead and happily make a video separately about things and things you need to know that'll kind of maybe explain the game better that Wargaming really doesn't explain very well. They do have a YouTube series that I recommend checking out that gives you kind of a half-assed, this is the mechanics of the game, and they try to break it down for you, which it's not bad, but sometimes it can be pretty confusing for players, and they'd rather see it in game rather than just writing formulas up on the screen and saying, now apply this. Like, you'd rather see some like hard examples of that, and maybe down the road I'll put it together a video for you guys of like a tutorial and how all that is. So again, going into the main firing range of the Freddy, that is 20.3 kilometers. But going back to the secondaries, which is worth talking about. Now, there's something I've talked about on this channel, or it was more or less on this Preussen Down the Line series, about that there's a big misconception about what these ships, like how to build them. The big thing that I can recommend you guys is that these are not secondary brawling battleships, not anymore. Matter of fact, the only time you're going to utilize your secondaries is middle to late game, and that is when you get your secondaries into the fray. Early game, it is suicide. You will die. There's too many things, too many gimmicks, too many just overpowering mechanics to hit your massive floating wiener schnitzel that you are going to be foundered so incredibly quickly. And it's going to be frustrating because a lot of you, I don't know if you have premium accounts, you're going to lose net credits, and it's going to be an incredibly frustrating experience because you just want your damn poison, and it seems like this thing is in the way of that. Again, tier 9s in this game already get a bit of a stigma of being stinkers just because it's right before the tier 10 and everybody wants the tier 10. So I totally understand that and get that. But going back to the secondaries on this ship, the secondary DPM is actually not bad at 253,540 with an actual hitting DPM of 51,766. Now, where does this put this in regards of other battleships at this tier? Well, I can tell you right now, the Giuseppe Verdi actually comes in first. Again, that's not really fair because it is SAP, but SAP kind of is. SAP secondaries are kind of a bit of a mixed bag anyways, which I'm not a big fan of, and we'll cross that, down the road. But it puts in regards of like its secondary DPM middle of the pack, and then its actual hitting DPM, it doesn't even crack I guess if you include the Hataka, whatever, it doesn't even crack it's a top 15 because the Pomeranian right there basically at 15 and 14. And the number one being the Navaran, excuse me, which is an awesome ship that I can't wait to make a review down the road for you guys too. So DPM's not, it's not bad, but it's no longer the king that it once was, is basically what I'm trying to say. Things change. The game ages, and so do your ships, and you can either age with those ships in regards to the thought process when tackling it, or you can still think it's 2016, and you're going to still hit the W key and go in there and dominate, and you are going to be sent back to port pretty quick. So kind of trying to stress this mentality to you guys. AA defense is almost not worth talking about. And your maximum range is the German 5.2. You obviously see it here on the bottom right of the screen, the different various ranges. Your short range AA is pretty dog shit at 77 DPS. Your mid range is 154, which is pretty dog shit. Is 445. That's like your bread and butter. And your long range is dog shit at 154. So basically, you're going to get struck. You're going to get continuously struck. You're going to need to be there. Your allies are going to need to support you because you are going to be fodder for the enemy aircraft carrier, and there's no denying it. Going into the maneuverability of the Friedrich der Grosse, we are clocking in at 30 knots as our top speed. Moving in with a rudder shift time of 24.5 seconds and a turning circle. Upgraded module. 17.5 second rudder shift and a turning circle radius of 940 meters. Acceleration is clocking in at 39.4 seconds. And where does that put it? Well, seems like to me that kind of puts it in the top 15 again, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, not even. Yeah, no, it's one of the worst. My bad. The worst being the Marlborough at 41.4 seconds for some reason, and that Friedrich der Grosse is coming in at 35. So, yeah, not good. Not good with the acceleration either, guys. That was my bad. So, and then going in last but not least, we're going to go into the concealment value for the Freddy. The concealment value of the Freddy is clocking in at a detection of 16.76. With the module on the ship, you get it down to 15.1. Which is what I highly recommend doing right here. I do not take the concealment captain skill because I believe 4 skill points are much more important in regards of taking like fire prevention or the manual control of the secondaries rather than investing into concealment, which is really, you're still going to be seeing from Nam, which is like, 14.3 or something like that for a full rig stealth build or something like that. So it really doesn't justify it, in my opinion, for this ship. Because aircraft carriers, subs, destroyers, it's just so prevalent that you're not really going to need to take advantage of your concealment because you're never going to be able to really take advantage of your concealment because you're pretty damn detectable. If you're looking for a stealthy battleship line, this is definitely not the line that you should be going down. That is a fact. So some quick thoughts here, quick tips before we go into battle here and I show you some gameplay on her. I'm going to demonstrate a game with the 420s. I originally had planned to show a game of 406s and 420s just to kind of show you the difference in regards of the the way that the shells are in regard to penetration and all that jazz. And realistically, it's very niche when you're going to take advantage of that reload time of the 406s, just because of the range you're playing at. My big advice with these ships, especially the Freddy, is you want to be passive in the beginning of the game. And I hate to say it, I hate to say that because I don't want to play passive, but if you do not play passive in the beginning of the game, your game will be over quick. It just will. This is how it has to be done. The play style of the ship does alter when you play more competitive. If you, for some reason, would want to take this into ranked, for example, you can alter your play style because there's less theoretical ships that could be shooting at your ship at one given time. But many of us are looking at this for randoms. That's what these reviews are mainly for, is for our random battles. And I can assure you, when it's 12v12, this ship is going to be singled out and shot at a lot. But you can utilize that to your advantage because more shells going downrange at your ship means less shells going downrange at your allies, which theoretically have way more carry potential than you do. It's a tough thing to say, but sometimes that's the best way to be a team player, is by trying to tank and absorb as much enemy fire as possible, but within reason. I'm not saying be on the front lines and absorb all 6 ships on the flanks fire. I'm saying be visible, but 18, 17 kilometers, people shoot you instead of shooting your cruiser, theoretically, that like your Des Moines sitting by the island, pew 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 pewing, etc., like stuff like that. So without further ado, guys, enough of me blabbering on. Let's go in and check out some gameplay on her. Alrighty, guys, and here we are in battle in the Friedrich de Grosse, this big German sausage. There are a couple things I didn't mention while looking at the port analysis. Sorry. Happens to be a bit of a trend on this channel, but again, these videos are just free thoughts, things that I have gotten while describing just playing the game for years, and things that just come to mind. All these things I'm thinking, especially when I sit there and I play 20, 30, 40 games in here to get footage for you guys to show. These are all things that I've accumulated. I rarely ever jot them down. If I do jot them down, they're like bullet points on a freaking piece of paper in front of me. So anyways, the one thing that I cannot stress enough on these top 3 BBs of this line, so that's the Bismarck, the Friedrich, and the Preussen, is that we are not secondary ships anymore, right? We run this hybrid secondary build, so we take that secondary flag, we take the secondary captain skills, the manual and the extending the range, right? But we take the aiming systems in the 3rd upgrade slot, and obviously we do that because we want to decrease our dispersion by -7% to make our guns a little bit more accurate. I have tried. I've played games of full secondary builds when I instead take that secondary module in that 3rd slot, and I've played aiming systems in that 3rd slot, and I can honestly tell you guys that the aiming systems is just a vastly superior choice in almost every way possible, because even if I get and push my ship into those secondary ranges, I'm still not seeing the amount of damage add up consecutively over games on average, right, that I would be in other ships. For example, like the Prinz Ruprecht, the Pommern 4 secondary build. I have a review on this channel. Go ahead and check that one out. And then obviously ships like the Los Andes and Valparaiso. These are all these ships you're going up against that are just going to be out secondary DPMing you and then have more tools at their disposal. That are going to keep them in the fight way longer. Again, these are things you're just up against, and this is just a fact, sadly. So my first tip that I have in the Friedrich goes, other than the build that we have, so you set up your Freddy the same, identical to mine, whatever, is the first tip I recommend is when you're sailing into battle, so you load in, and it says battle starts or whatever, go half speed. Don't go full speed. And the reason why is you want to see your flanks play out and develop rather than getting into that range where then you're necessarily the first ship spotted and then you were shot at by anyone and everyone, including ships that are even going over to the A flank because you're so large and easy to hit. Especially at top tier, it's not uncommon to run into the likes of a Musashi, Yamato, just to name a couple. And then obviously there's a bunch of HE spammers. So, But yeah, these are just ships that that are commonly going to shoot at you. And again, with that plunging fire that we talked about, is going to actually increase the likelihood of citadeling you, because they have the penetration and they have that shell hitting or shell striking angle on you, which is going to go right past your turtleback and go right into that juicy citadel that the Friedrich Grosse does indeed have. But here's a good example on the Alaska, which is 18 kilometers away, taking the aiming system mod 3 rather than the secondaries upgraded module in that third slot. We're able to land what? 4 shells on hit, 2 pens, 2 overpens, and one of those pens being a citadel, clocking in for what is 18, 19,000 damage, something around that range. Awesome result in our Friedrich Grosse. And these are shells and shots that you're going to see happen more often than not if you play the ship right. The mentality of the German battleship main line, Preussen line, is no longer the secondary tank brawler that it used to be back in 2016, 2017, 2018. You have to play a little bit more conservatively in order to get the most out of her, which I know is a big bummer for a lot of players. It was for myself as well, someone that ran back in the day a ledge mod Grosse first. Times have changed. And if you still want to play these ships, which I think they are very fun ships to still play and get a lot out of, you're going to have to alter the way you play the game. And my biggest advice is how you play these things is somewhere in between the likes of a American battleship and a Japanese battleship. Not the bungo line, even though the bungo line kind of does the same thing as the main line, just with a little more consistency and has the spotter plane gimmick. That is going to allow you to increase your survivability and be able to actually rain AP down a little bit more reliable than that of previous builds that we've had in this game. Again, side note, I very rarely ever load HE, basically never. I would say you're shooting AP 99% of the time in these ships. Your HE is just so anemic that you're really not going to get any good, like, viable results from her unless you just want to do raw pen damage because you have a nose-in Petro and you're just not, or Novosibirsk, and you're just not being able to chunk his superstructure effectively enough. Even though we do have a good example, I don't know if it already happened or maybe it's going to happen, of like a 14k salvo of a Novosibirsk with your guns. Again, this is not, this would not be possible if we weren't taking the aiming system mod, and I cannot stress it enough that you have to take the aiming system mod on this thing. So what have we done, basically? Oh, that was the shot right there, by the way. So what have we done, basically, with this line? And this is speaking more to the line in general rather than just the Friedrich. We've basically altered the playstyle of these ships to be more of that in lines with your traditional battleship line. And we've taken a more conservative passive approach in the early game so that we can save our HP so that when it comes to later game, which you're going to see an example of, then we can make use of our secondaries and the HP that we were able to still have left over from not losing it all in the beginning of the game. It's a play style that sucks because it's a combination of being a very, very massive ship that loves to eat damage and a ship that doesn't dish out the pain in return very well, and being a very detectable ship. So it's all this combination of all these three things that really lead up to being a very I would probably say a mediocre platform. And that being said, if you have the mindset that you are very average, you can really upset a lot of people in this game, especially if you outplay them in the brains department, which again is shouldn't be too hard to do in this game. But again, there are your players, because, well, the big thing is that there's just better ships in this game than there was, 7, 8, 10 years ago, or not 10 years yet, but 7, 8, 9 years ago. There's just more gimmicks, airstrikes, to name a couple, main battery reload booster, smoke spamming HE, that sort of stuff, right? So you have to play around that and understand that you're kind of the underdog, and if you play into that mentality, I think you'll get better results, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, this was a great example of, like, the reason I chose this battle is because I think it was a great example and just showcase all the positives and some of the negatives that this ship does bring to the table. And I think it allows us to have a conglomerate of what to expect when you play this thing. Another big downside to these ships, and this again starts at the whole line essentially, is you only have 8 guns as a max gun. And for some reason, Wargaming decided to take the poison, you split the Grosse and all this shit, which again I was not a big fan of. Split them up and give it 457s, which again is like a coping mechanism for like, yeah, like, you know, the ship kind of bites ass, but here now you have this overmatch capability even more so. And it's like, I understand the idea, and we'll get to more on that when I cover the Preussen, doing a Preussen analysis, but it's incredibly frustrating from someone who actually really enjoyed the Grosse Cure first to this now. Yeah, it's just frustrating, to say the least. But you do have that, so you are going to be getting 457 at the end of this line, which, again, in your department is super nice. For the games department, especially in regards of the overmatch power creep that's in this game, yeah, it's not very nice. So, but again, with the 420s, I mean, you're still reliably doing good damage if you hit the target. And that's the big caveat here, if you hit the target. And only having 8 guns going down range, even though it might be every 25.5 seconds, it's a big toss-up, you know? So that's what we're trying to do by taking that aiming system. Instead of going in full on the secondaries, which it's really not that good of a secondary platform anyways. I'm not saying it can't shine at times, and I'm not saying it doesn't have decent secondaries or good secondaries. The problem is getting to utilize those secondaries in this platform on this ship that you have. It's very hard to make use of that, especially in the random queue, and especially when you're getting thrown into tier 10 and, God forbid, super ship games. It's incredibly frustrating to deal with, and too bad I didn't show you guys a aircraft carrier game that I had to deal with, because yeah, you're gonna have to eat damage. It's one of those things that you're just gonna have to wear it on the chin, and hopefully the CV doesn't continuously come and strike you over and over again, because the likelihood of you dodging incoming airstrikes is so minuscule, and you're basically almost guaranteed. My next tip in this thing is, unless you're at realistically reasonably close ranges, I would say around 10 kilometers or less, firing only your front, I guess, 2 turrets, so that's 4 guns, you're almost always going to have horrendous dispersion. I don't know what it is with these ships, especially basically pertains to the German battleships, and you really saw it with the Bayern and then going all the way down this line. But if you just fire your front 2 turrets, your dispersion is fucking terrible. But the second you swing your ass around and get all those turrets to bear, that's when you unlock pretty damn decent dispersion at times, which is awesome. That's what we want to see. I don't know if it's like written into the code or something to like get these things to not have the bow tanking capability, or to get the bow tanking offensive out of the ship, but like the second you're able to swing around and utilize all your turrets, you can definitely punish enemy ships, and you get that, like, I don't want to say Elding dispersion, but you definitely unlock like cruiser dispersion almost on this thing, and it's incredible to see at times. So my last tip in this thing is there are times that I would just go ahead and show flat broadside, especially at closer ranges. Yeah, you're going to eat pen damage, especially if you have the HP like I do here. And it's better than showing that angle where ships could theoretically bypass you and citadel you. At times, you just have to make that read. Just go ahead and show flat broadside. There's some German cruisers that can do the same thing. I would highly recommend doing that, just because you're a higher chance of eating just those pens or over pens, because your turtleback eats them, rather than just doing colossal citadel damage to you and potentially dead striking you. Though it is hard to dev strike these things with guns, I will give you that. I have seen it happen before, but it is incredibly rare. You have to have a player that knows what they're doing against the Freddy, and have a player that doesn't know what they're doing in the Freddy. So, and again, you're seeing us make use of our secondaries finally in game, with the 2 commander skills taken, and we have the captain flag as well, along with our adrenaline rush skill, which is helping us out a bit, but we still able to have more than 3/4 of our HP on the ship. I think we've maintained a very healthy dose of positioning. Our positioning has been exquisite this game, and we've really done a good job of retaining and maintaining our HP pool, which again is very hard to do in the Friedrich Grosse. And I need you to understand this mindset that people are going to have with you being, oh my god, we have basically a full HP Preussen or Friedrich Grosse, this guy's trash, blah blah, and so and so. There are times I understand what players are saying, but there are other times you need to realize that if you have no battle impact and you have that HP saved, yeah, I understand the idea that maybe we played a little bit too passive. And again, learning the ropes in the beginning of the game, there's going to be games where that is just going to happen, because you haven't been comfortable enough yet to realize those situations that you need to understand whether or not to be aggressive, whether to play a little bit more passive, that sort of stuff. But it will come with time. And it's all about reading the map, the mini map, and understanding player movements, because you have to really outthink your opponents in this ship. The last bit of advice that I can give with this line in general, especially retaining to to the Friedrich de Grosse, is understanding that your tanking ability is almost showing a big juicy broadside to ships, especially at longer ranges, because they cannot resist. And they will shoot, and they will shoot, and they will expose their position to your teammates, and that'll allow your teammates to capitalize and deal damage back to them. Your best, I guess, offensive strat is to have a horrendous looking defensive strat, if that makes sense. I've seen this talked about a million times before, and I cannot approve this tactic enough. Like a stupid German battleship commander at times, at range, not up close and sailing in. And people will treat you that way and expose themselves because they see this massive German battleship and they're like, I have to shoot this guy. I have to shoot him. And that'll actually be the greatest benefit to your team. As long as you're not eating catastrophic amounts of damage, you're, again, showcasing that you can deal with that and make the plans accordingly to, adjust, basically. And understanding that if people think you're a terrible player, they're going to treat you like a terrible player and they're going to expose themselves, and that is when you're going to be able to outplay them, which is always nice to see. And what else is there to talk about this ship before I get off here in regards of like moving on to my final thoughts about her? I think she's a solid BB. I think she has a bad reputation in this game, but I think it's based around bad advice. And a bad mentality on how to play her. A lot of people think that because she just gets bad results, that she's a bad ship. But I think more or less it comes down to the commander playing the ship to understand how to play her right, and that's what you're going to get the most out of her. And fight that stigma of being just a secondary W key brawler, brainless German BB player, and really outthink your opponents, because that is when you're going to get the best results out of your Freddy. 192,000 damage, E-rank game. I think we finished like second or third on the team. Or actually finished first. Wow, look at that. Great results. So some final thoughts I have on her, like I was touching base a little bit on in game or in battle, and now we're back at the port screen here. I do want to talk a little bit about her server statistics, which I think is incredibly important to talk about, and I'm regarding the NA statistics, the North American server. It's no surprise to me this ship has the lowest base XP rating, lowest damage count per game, about 53,600 average, lowest frag count, and achieving only a win rate of 46.4%, and then her win rate differential is only coming in at least the time recording this video, at a negative or minus 2.03%. So basically topping the charts in almost every category other than the win rate differential for the Freddy. And it's no surprise to me that that's the case. It's just because I think, again, we're stuck in this stigma of, well, we're gonna play like German battleships beforehand, and we're kind of stuck in that early mentality and early era. And I don't think the Bismarck does this ship justice, because I think the Bismarck is actually inherently tier for tier a better battleship, because it doesn't have to fight as cancerous of ships usually as often. It is tier 8 going up to tier 10s. I understand that. But just a better all-around battleship, a better hull. It just does things better, I feel like. And the Bismarck's definitely a highlight of this line. I do think so. And I think a lot of players have fun in that ship just because it is so effective at its tier. And then you come to this thing and you're expecting to play the same way, and yeah, not so much. I know Bismarcks that still go full secondary builds, and they actually do reasonably well in that ship. So kudos to them, because there's times that I still play it that way too. I rotate commanders with it too, and there are times you can get away with it. But I think once you take that big step from tier 8 to tier 9, no bueno. There's no more. There's no way we could play that way anymore, because we just simply don't have the effective hull, concealment, armor, blah, blah, and so on. Playstyle, we're just so massive. We're a bigger Bismarck. We handle worse. And it's just all around harder to play. So anyways, down the road, I probably will do more of like a big misconception video about German BBs. I don't want to do it yet. I'm just doing down the line now. I'll probably stay away from the German nation just for, a couple videos here and there, just so I make sure I cross a, wider spectrum. But I definitely want to circle back on these guys because I do think they're kind of talked about in a negative way for too many reasons. And I think they're really mistreated. And there's a big misconception about how to play these ships. And maybe I could go ahead and show more of a solid playthrough, like live action of how to play these ships. Just because I feel like they've been dirty or been done dirty for so long now. And it really does suck. Like the number one thing I highly recommend is you got to stay off Reddit when it comes to these guys because I think there's a lot of players. There are some that are good. I've seen that, but there are a lot of them that just they don't really know what they're talking about. Sadly, in regard to these ships, and they're only looking at very narrow lensed, and they're not willing to understand that these ships are no longer those ships that maybe they once thought they were. Which again is just showing the progression of the way the game's headed. So, final thought about her too. I have talked about this earlier on in the video, but I do think she could use some love. A buff here or there wouldn't be bad for her or for this line in general. But I don't think they need much. I think they just need a little bit of something. But I think the bigger thing that needs to be done that could really help these ships out is, again, I haven't talked about it in a while, but the +2, -2 matchmaker is horrendous. I don't really like it. And I think that would immediately help this ship, along with a whole buttload of other ships, help those ships out tremendously. And I think the players base would be a little bit happier with it. You know, you always have those wannabe try-hard guys that are like, oh, I love and challenge, I embrace the challenge, all this shit, but then they're like 40% win rate players. So it's like, what are you actually talking about? So again, I'm trying to advocate, you know, as a 61% or plus or whatever, and I don't know, 30 or 25,000 games, I'm trying to advocate on your behalf, and you're shutting me down. You know, I'm trying to help you out, and I think it would help us all out if that change was implemented. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully I did a good enough job or an adequate job of talking about what this ship can and cannot do. Like I said, down the road, I will go ahead and make a video, kind of a guide on how to play these ships. Maybe I'll get Jacques back on for that one, and we can talk and discuss and debate a little bit more about what these ships can and can't do, and how to play them accordingly, right, in the new meta. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for your time. If you made it all the way through this video, awesome. Go ahead and smash that like button and tell me what you guys think about these ships. What are your thoughts? Anyways, I will catch you all in the next one. Peace out.